Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Game Plan for Education, Episode 3. My name is Chris Aviles. I am an educator, esports coach, and product evangelist for Gameplan. Really excited to bring to you two of my favorite people in the world of gaming and esports. Two people, I would argue, changing the game and really making a difference for those that matter most, and that is the kids that we serve. Super excited to be joined by Dr. Matt Harrison and Jess Rowlings. How we doing?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. Got little bios here for you. Jess is a qualified speech pathologist and researcher at the University of Melbourne, and she specializes in video game-based intervention to build social capacity in neurodivergent children. She is the CEO and co-founder of Next Level Collaboration. And Dr. Matt Harrison is the other half of Next Level Collaboration, on top of being a former educator. He's a researcher and digital creator with a passion for utilizing technology to support social capacity building, again, in the kids who we are all here to make sure have a seat at the table. So can't thank you both for joining me. I know you guys have been on a whirlwind. You guys were at ISTE, you guys were at Games for Change, huge conference, intimate conference, coming on over to the States. How was the experience?
Yeah, I think, Matt, we had a great time. ISTE was fantastic. It was, we have conferences in Australia, but we'd never seen, I don't know, Matt, you might have, but I'd never seen anything at the scale of ISTE with just the range of presentations, the experiences, the backgrounds. It was pretty phenomenal. And Games for Change was so exciting to just see more into, the actual game side of things too. Matt and I are huge gamers. So it was personally, I think, very exciting to us as well as professionally.
Yeah. It's neat. I heard, Jess, you're a big Legend of Zelda fan, and Matt, you and I share a passion for StarCraft. I know that was the game that got me into gaming and esports when I was in 8th grade. And that's one of the through lines. Every time I talk about you, every time I hear about you, is just the passion that you guys are bringing to the space and the work that you're doing. Jess, where does that passion come from?
Yeah, for me, I'm neurodivergent myself. So I always knew that I was different growing up. I was really academically gifted. So never had any problems with schoolwork and that I was, a model student in that way. But for me, I had a lot of challenges around social inclusion. I found it really hard to make friends, but back, in the early 2000s, we didn't really have as much understanding of autism and ADHD as we do now. So I didn't get a autism diagnosis till I was 19 or ADHD until 22, which answered a lot of questions for me. But, in school, I knew that there was something. I just didn't know why I felt so different. But for me, when I was in about grade 4, we got a PlayStation 2, which was, the absolute peak of technology at the time. And I still think it's a great console. But for me, having that communal interest in games with other kids was a way for me to build, some social connections and interact with them that I didn't really have before. I could talk about new games or, there's games I'd beaten, so I could give them advice on, how to do something they were stuck on. And, in reality, a lot of the time, those interactions didn't really lead to ongoing friendships, but they were still opportunities to, connect with my peers and my classmates that I didn't have before. And, now as an adult and especially as a speechy, I really enjoyed working with sort of late elementary or primary school age, those early adolescents. And, when you're 13, they're a bit less enthusiastic about a lot of session activities, but I work with kids, who for them, incorporating gaming and their interest into session activities really got them so much more invested. And I have one boy who, he loved Dark Souls, the video game series, and he was...
He's a glutton for punishment.
That's it, yeah. And he was really good at it too. And he was, had quite high levels of anxiety, had quite a few challenges in different areas at school. But that was a way that, I actually managed to build a relationship with him. And by the end of our sessions, we ended up doing Dark Souls themed activities. And, you're going to explain to me how to beat a boss. We're going to work on our conversational skills. And at the end of our sessions, he said, I guess I didn't really hate coming here, which was, a pretty glowing review from him, but it was using that interest that made things feel relevant to him, and where it actually made it much more positive for him too.
I love it. And I'm sure even with that learner, your passion and your love for what he loves was contagious as well. Matt, where does the passion come from for you?
Oh, Chris, I think everyone who knows me knows that I'm a massive nerd and I love gaming. And when I was a teacher early in my career, I had a group of students, and some of them had formal labels of disability or neurological difference, and some didn't. And these were students who were brilliant kids, but they were just struggling around that social inclusion piece, around, like lunchtimes, sitting by themselves, or not quite feeling like they had a friendship circle. So I started a gaming club, and it's Friday afternoons, and it was a great chance for me to build up relationships with these kids, and to show them that, I am a teacher, yes, but also, I can, I care about them, and we share this interest, and we can build that connection. And what I found, we know how important relationships are in teaching. What I found is the kids I was working with could do things when they're playing these games that we just didn't see in other contexts. We didn't see in physical education, our sporting classes. We didn't see in art class, or we didn't see in music. And they had an oral language, a language around the games. They felt confident. They could be in leadership positions. And these were kids that sometimes weren't often thought of as being leaders. And so I thought, as a teacher, I thought, how can we use these games as spaces to build up confidence, to build up social capacity, to build up self-advocacy skills? And I started that work in my master's, and I continued it through to my PhD. I think a lot of really good educational research questions come from things that teachers see in the classroom and experience in the classroom. And so I wanted to work with my students to sort of find out, okay, how can we leverage their strengths and interests in gaming as a way to build up social capacity? So that's really the start of the research journey for me.
Yeah, I mean, your PhD thesis was basically cooperative video games can be used as spaces for developing social capacity for kids. And so, again, marrying, your own nerddom, owning it, and sharing it with kids. I mean, you would have to think, too, as a teacher, I know I had the same experience where when kids knew that I played games and I liked games and they could talk to me about games, all of a sudden they're like, cool, like, they're coming in on lunch. Did you play this? Did you see the new review? I had a kid email me the other day. He's like, what do you think about what's the new game? Like Once Human. They're like, are you playing Once Human? Because they just love to connect. And anytime an adult is excited about what they're excited about, I mean, it's good for relationships, and relationships are good for learning, right? But talk to me then about, right, I hear the passion, I'm starting to hear the vision. So you and Jess, co-founders, Next Level Collaboration, how did we get from theory to practice, right? Because that's my favorite thing is I love when people roll up the sleeves and do the work, right? It's one thing to say, hey, kids love video games, we can build relationships, but to actually do the work, to actually bring the games into the classroom, to actually use them in a practice. How did that happen?
I think, Jess, you should tell the story of how we were introduced, because I think it's great.
Yeah, it's one of my best, I think, career stories I've got. I started at the uni in 2020. We'd just sort of come into COVID times, and I got an email from my old boss from when I started, who said, "Oh, it's a guy down the hall who's got a Super Nintendo in his office, and I think you should have a chat to him. You'll probably get along really well." So we did. We had a few too many Zoom meetings over COVID. Just talking about games.
Right.
And Lego and all the adult things we love. We're all just grown-up kids inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then after a few too many lockdown Zoom meetings, we accidentally started a social enterprise, which was people learn to make their own bread, or all sorts of things, and we started a business. But I know, Matt, because you had your PhD research, and you do research and it's fantastic, but also I think your PhD research was way too good to just sit on a shelf gathering dust and, the occasional citation forever. And Matt, I know you really wanted to get this out there based on your experiences working with your kids, that you did through your PhD project.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things where we were, I finished my PhD, I just met Jess. I started a program at the University of Melbourne called Translating Research at Melbourne. And I went to their orientation or information night. And this program is typically aimed at engineers or people in the medical research field. and it's about how you get research out into the community. So, if you've invented a new heart valve, how can you take that to market? If you've invented a new type of concrete through your PhD research, rather than going down that academic path, how can you actually get it out into the community? How can you actually begin, manufacturing your theory essentially? And so Jess and I are like, well, we're not heart valves, we're not concrete, but we would really love to get this either as a charity or a social enterprise to get gaming groups happening in our community, because we just saw so much demand and so much need, even for our own. Mm-hmm. Just from our own lived experiences. So we went through this translating research at Melbourne program. I said to Jess, hey, let's do this multiplayer. This sort of adventure is more fun when you've got, more people involved. And that was 4 years ago, I think, or 4.5 years ago. And It's been this wild ride where the University of Melbourne has really supported our work, and has seen the passion we have for this area. And we really wanted to get our programs not just out in schools and clinics, but we also wanted to employ young adults who are neurodivergent and give them a career pathway. I know Chris Gameplan does some great work around career planning around esports. And so we, in a similar mindset, we wanted to find autistic young adults and adults with ADHD like myself, trying to give them a viable career pathway where they're not exploited. Jess and I, we know there's a lot of work experience for 2 years, and that sort of thing. So we really wanted to make sure that we had a viable career path for young autistic adults, as well as helping children and teenagers to be able to participate in our programs.
Yeah, I mean, and the work being done at Next Level Collaboration, I mean, is inspiring, right? Part of how I heard about your work and the reason I reached out, as a huge fan, was because I saw the same need you did, but I didn't know how to solve it. That's not my background. That's not my world. And so to know that there were two highly qualified, energetic, passionate, and really big kids at heart doing this great work, to me, it's super exciting. I don't know. It's something about the whole recipe, man. I mean, it's super exciting what you guys are doing. I really can't, I know I was telling you off camera, just what a huge fan of the work I am, because I have seen it as an educator for 17 years. And when I have kids who, regardless of diagnosis, when they hear that games are not only, something that we talk about, but we use in my class, something that we embrace, something that, they know that they can feel confident to tell me that they play, Persona 5 and stuff like that, it makes a difference. It really does. And with gaming being so universal, I've even found that when we open up that space to let kids express, themselves, through that world of gaming. And that's even how I got Minecraft and started with that, is I had a kid build the Globe Theater in Minecraft, all because I asked them, how would you like to show me what you learned? They built it. I never even heard of Minecraft. But the other thing too is once they start seeing other kids, the kid who plays football, the cheerleader, the kid in the marching band, everybody's playing games. And next thing you know, right, it becomes this point of conversation, and they're having conversations, that they weren't having before. They're talking and stuff like that. So, I mean, at Next Level Collaboration, walk me through the mission. And because I feel it's just so unique and delivered in such a cool way. Walk me through, because I think with the audience that we have who are going to be watching this, I don't think we need to, we're preaching to the choir when it comes to, we can use video gamings for education, we can help, right? But to me, it's the way in which you are delivering the learning is really cool. So talk to me, Jess. I mean, maybe a little bit about the mission, what it looks like, because to me, that's where I fell in love, is the actual delivery.
Yeah, for us, our program, we're designed to be really neurodiversity affirming because this was sort of something, and like even my experiences as a speech pathologist, we found that there was a real gap. A lot of the, I guess, historical, the social skills programs, some of them took a fairly like deficit focused approach, looking at maybe, skill gaps or things that the kids weren't as good at. Or in some cases like going, well, what's wrong, what do we need to fix, and we're not here to fix the kids, there's nothing wrong with them. And the stereotypes, they don't have empathy, and that we work with the most beautifully empathetic kids, like they are just so kind to each other, but they show it in such a different way. And that's what we try and focus on, is identifying and celebrating those differences and giving them what we call functional or collaborative skills, to do things like collaborative teamwork and self-advocate, and get through life, because these are skills that you don't just need when you're in school doing group work. You also use them as an adult when you're working, whether at the uni or next level collaboration or at a bank. And building actually those skills for life and giving them skills to navigate a neurotypical world. So for example, like we focus on teaching listening skills, but this doesn't look like having to sit still in your chair or look at the front. We've got kids who do sit still, and that's okay. That's what works best for them. We have kids that like the exercise Swiss balls, they work really well sitting on one of them, so they can bounce and just self-regulate and stim to help them listen. So what we're really focusing on is that functional outcome of the skill, is how are they listening, and are they listening in the way that works best for them, not so much worrying about some of those neurotypical expectations. Because I say to people as an adult, like, I can either actually listen or look like I'm listening, because it takes me so much work to look like I'm listening according to neurotypical norms, that nothing's actually really going in. So we have a 3-stage program, and because we know, like, especially our autistic kids really like that sense of predictability and structure and routine. When they know what to expect, it just helps reduce like a lot of that anxiety around surprises or unpredictability. So we start with stage A, which is our skill instruction stage, and this is where people like Matt and I actually explicitly teach these target skills. So we might be looking at things like asking for help, giving and receiving constructive feedback, and even things like actual team awareness. Where are the other people in the game? Do you need to slow down and wait for other people to catch up? We also use video review, so we actually film the kids playing each week, like a YouTube or a Let's Play, and we use this as part of that skill instruction to get them to talk through what they were doing in the last week. And it's really interesting. You see some of their insights and they can explain to you, we go, why did you do that? And they've actually got a really logical, well thought out reason as to why, they've approached a task in a particular way. And it's like, oh no, right. Actually this worked really, really well. And it helps us understand how they present and the things that work best for them too. So after that, we move into the gameplay, and this is about sort of 2/3 of the session. And it's sort of important to be clear that it's not the games doing the teaching, it's right. us. But the games in that stage B create the conditions for them to practice those collaborative target skills. So we use sort of time rounds of maybe about 8 to 10 minutes. And then we actually pause for a couple of minutes and do a timeout and feedback, where we go through all the skills that they've used and give them examples of when they've seen them, to help them actually understand, how they're using these skills in gameplay and what those outcomes are for the team. I know Matt's group the other week, they got given one power up. So they actually had a democratic decision-making process of, well, who's going to get this one power up? Where's actually the most strategic place to put it, even if one person wants it? Maybe it's better off with Will because his character needs a bit of extra support. So it's really impressive seeing how they approach things. And then we finish up with like a reflection and a guided reflective process. And that's where we go through and look at, the skills that they think they've done well, how they think they've done them really well, but then also what they want to focus on next week. And again, you just get some really interesting insights into how they perceive the skills too. Because some weeks they'll say, actually, I don't think this game's particularly good for this skill, and that's why we didn't do it. And you go, yeah, no, I think you're actually right.
I mean, and there's so much too to unpack, because number one, I remember the most impactful thing when I was learning about your work was what you said in the beginning about meeting kids where they are. And not coming from a place of trying to correct a deficit. And the first time I heard you guys talk about that, I reflected on my college experience and even the PD I get. And a lot of it is around that. And even in the conversations I've had with some parents of, neurodivergent students, that seems to be what they want for their kids is a fix. You know what I mean? And it seems so obvious, but it's something that never clicked with me until I heard you guys talk about it. And so, number one, that was something that I loved. And then number two, what I heard you saying, Jess, and Matt, if you want to kind of explain it, is the games are the vehicle, right? Which is what I love, because good instruction, good teaching, good clinical work is just good clinical work, right? And how you present it, right, can be different to whom you're working with, whom you're teaching, right? So same thing, esports is the vehicle with which I used to teach my English class. Instead of doing public speaking, my kids would stream to Twitch. Same standards, same learning, same principles, higher engagement, higher interest, more buy-in. But what was also neat, Jess, and what you mentioned is you said the game that week. And I learned that you guys actually change the games on a pretty regular basis. I mean, Matt, do you want to talk about the role, right? We know, I guess, games play the role of the teaching tool, but what does that actually look like? How is the game a good tool?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Jess is saying about how it creates the conditions
right
in which players can use collaborative skills and all these other skills. Look, the first thing you step back is we know the research on this is really strong, is that a lot of our young people can tell you a dictionary definition of negotiation until the cows come home.
Mm-hmm.
But it's recognizing when a skill is useful in a meaningful context, emotionally self-regulating themselves, calming down, performing that skill, and then evaluating whether that skill had the outcome they desired and what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the secret. So we know there's skill acquisition, but there's also like performance practice. The idea of practicing skills in a context which is likely to reflect the real world when they're going to need these skills, or shouldn't say real world because gaming is a real world, but in a physical world. And so what's really interesting for us is we know that one of the critiques of the way we used to teach skills was through role play, and it's like it's meaningless in the sense it's a bit like if you're practicing, you're playing soccer, and you're standing still, kicking the ball back and forth. But when you actually play a game, it's very rare that you're standing still. So we want to practice these skills when people are, emotionally invested in something, and gaming is such a great way for that. And so the games we use really matter, and not all games are created equal. So through the PhD research that I did and then have refined over the years with Jess, is we came up with 39 principles of game design, of cooperative game design, that create the conditions where players are most likely to use these high-value collaborative skills. So these are things like designed interdependence, where players have to work together. Leave no woman or man or fairy behind. There's a great game we have called classic game from the early 2010s called Rayman Legends. We have one player on the old Nintendo Wii U. If anyone has heard of the Wii U, you'd know that it's a great console. If you haven't played one, look it up on YouTube. But in Rayman Legends on the Wii U, you have one player controlling Murphy, who's a fairy character. And Murphy's a bit like a mouse cursor. Murphy can't die, can't run into things, can go through walls. But they cannot... the player controlling Murphy can't scroll the screen forward. And this is a bit like a 2D platform game like the Super Mario series, in that all the other players have to navigate the level and move the screen forward, and Murphy's like an assist. So Murphy can do things like tickle enemies to distract them, can cut down a rope to build a bridge, can open gates, and it's that coordination between the player controlling Murphy and the other players. And to finish a level, you have to get everyone to the finish line. And it's one of those great game design principles where to be successful, you really do need to use these high-value collaborative skills in a way that's comfortable for you to be able to experience that team success. And the team success is greater than the individual success. Everyone has a role, a defined role, but outcome that really matters is the team outcome. So these are the sorts of things we look for in games. And Rayman Legends is a wonderful example of a well-designed collaborative or cooperative video game, particularly on the Wii U.
I love it. And this work and the work that you're talking about led to the first book, Using Video Games to Level Up Collaboration for Students. And it's wonderful. It really is wonderful. The first book was fantastic. And so talk to me about maybe the impact that book has had and what you are hoping that others took from it.
Yeah. So for me, I had the PhD thesis, and I thought, wow, this could, first of all, I think it could have a great impact on the way that we run these social capacity building programs. But also, I know that not everyone wants to read a PhD thesis. So I took the thesis, and we really wanted to produce something for educators or for speech pathologists to be able to take away and run these programs. And so it's really designed to be a how-to manual. And we know that a lot of people have the enthusiasm, but they say they don't have the confidence or the knowledge around this space. Yeah, great, Chris. Yeah, you are the target audience.
This guy.
So we wanted to have it as a starting point, and it won't tell you everything, but it'll give people enough, and it has the resources, and the photocopyable resources, and the assessment sheets and everything in there that teachers could really start something in their own school.
Yeah.
The other part of it is it has a research translation element to it that we know a lot of schools and a lot of school districts are saying, hey, this sounds great, but where's the research evidence? So it's actually having a dedicated chapter to how to speak to school leadership about getting this into your school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As an educator, it's one thing, like I want to use video games in my classroom, but to have the book and the chapter on the research to say, I'm not making this up. People way smarter than me have done the work, and I want to use their amazing outcomes for our students. So again, when you talk about like doing the work and you talk about arming people and creating change and the stuff that I love to see, right? I mean, that you guys killed it, man. That was so good. It was so good. And if you haven't checked it out, folks listening, if you have a passion for serving kids and being inclusive and game-based learning, wherever that passion is, you're talking about, I started teaching games 13, 14 years ago, right? Very early in my career. It wasn't until that book that I was armed with what I needed to get people who weren't as passionate to understand why I was passionate. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. A lot of my admins just said yes because I never left them alone. And I was really excited, right? One of the best principals I ever had said, I don't understand this, but you're really excited about it. Go ahead. Yeah. Right. But I haven't always been in that situation. Not every admin has always been as open-minded. And so for you guys to not just say, hey, it like you said, it doesn't cover everything and it doesn't need to, but it covers enough that you are going to make an impact on the kids that you're teaching. And then you also have what you need to be armed with, right, to help convince stakeholders to invest in the Wii U or let you connect the Switch to the school network and all the silly things that we worry about in school. So, listen, I know every time we talk, I get all excited. But like I said, it's contagious. You guys killed it. So it was unbelievable. Yeah.
Now, I guess as that experience and the feedback we got from teachers on the first book, that Jess and I wanted to really also bring that lens of inclusive education to esports. Mm-hmm. In the second book, Press B to Belong, and this is our most recent book, and it has that same philosophy. It's about, the theory is great, and it's important to have research informing our practice. Yeah. What does it actually look like in the classroom?
Yes.
What are the practicalities? That's what people want to know. So, oh, yes, I do want to. I think every teacher would say, yes, I do want to support neurodivergent students. Yes, I do want to get, more gender equality in my, esports programs. What do I do? Sort of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're 100% correct. And that's where I was going to, is we have Press B to Belong. And it's the intersection of esports and inclusivity and building on the work that you've done. And in the same vein, when I talk about esports and starting my own, middle school esports team to starting Garden State esports, and a lot of people don't realize I got no's for 7 years. I tried to start esports in my school for 7 years, and for various reasons, it was no. And, it took so much effort to get people to buy in that when Steve Isaacs and Jesse Lubinsky and Christine Lyon-Bailey and we wrote our book, we took a similar approach to what you guys did is arm the educators, not just with the practical, right, but how to help convince stakeholders. So talk to me about Press B to Belong. It builds on the first book. And how does esports come in? How do you continue the practical aspect, right? But then also supporting the educators so they can help facilitate change in their school.
Yeah, we work with Dan Martinez on the book too, who runs the Fuse Cup Esports League. They started off in Queensland in Australia, and they're just huge now. They all through Asia Pacific as well. And Dan's like us; he's also a gamer who, like you, is using games in the kids' interests. To help them, write essays on Taylor Swift in English because when you're 13, it's way easier to do stuff that's actually relevant and interesting to you. Than stuff that's not. And I think for all of us, like with Matt's Lunchtime Gaming Group, we just saw the potential that these interest-based programs had. And even like when I was in grade 5, and one of the teachers used to bring in his PS2 at the end of the term. And for him, Mr. Perry was the local hero at the end of the term. It was, like you said, just a way to connect with the staff as, humans rather than their teachers, where you do have this dynamic where, you're the kids in the class and the teacher is running things. And yeah, we saw especially that this was so valuable for kids from marginalized backgrounds who didn't always have those same opportunities for inclusion in other contexts. Even when I was at school, like I was rubbish at PE, not super great at art, good at maths and science. That doesn't really make you cool, but to have something like an esports program would have just been the most brilliant thing for me to connect with other kids in that structured, and supported setting where, like for some of Matt's kids too, you actually get celebrated and acknowledged for having that gaming knowledge. Because we have kids at next level and, it's really sad, but it's the first time that they've ever been celebrated for their, massive amounts of gaming expertise and, full walkthroughs of, Elder Scrolls Oblivion that they can just reel off, at a moment's notice. So for us, we wanted to, like you said, there's so many teachers that want to support their kids and they're like, I'm not a gamer myself. I don't know how. And that's where we come in because we can help you with all that. All you need to do is just want to be able to support them and we can help you with the rest. So we ended up doing some interviews as part of the book, actually speaking to different teachers who had run, these brilliant esports groups. And these teachers all had, a specific sort of, marginalized community that they work with. We had, someone who worked with, primarily neurodivergent students. We had someone who, had a school with a very low socioeconomic background. We had regional and remote schools, and Matt and I are both from regional Australia. So, we know that some things are so much harder, even just in terms of, infrastructure and internet access. Kids from those backgrounds and, supporting female and non-binary players who haven't historically always been welcomed in the gaming community, and learning from these teachers' experiences and what they'd actually done to build such successful programs and the things that, they'd specifically found helpful for the kids that they work with too. We have one teacher who worked with a lot of First Nations students and had really high rates of disengagement with school. And so for her, esports was actually a way, to get them engaged. And there was a bit of, well, they're not at school. Well, is this going to really help? And it's like, if they're not at school in the first place and esports is what's getting them there, then that's your building blocks. You can, work on their participation in other classes, but for them, she goes, well, we can, if you're, demonstrating positive behaviors and, maintaining your engagement in your other classes, we want you to be part of esports, but we need to make sure, that everything's going well across all your schooling. And for them, that was suddenly, when they did start turning up to school, 5 days a week and participating in art and science, which was just huge. And having, that interest space, that inclusive space of esports was really what helped. So we wanted to kind of take all these teachers' experiences and, turn them into a 200 and something page book that, you can go and buy and get those takeaway practical strategies. And we also developed inclusive esports framework as well, because you hear that term inclusion thrown around so much, but we're like, well, what does this actually mean? And we adopted a framework from Sweden, which was really interesting. It was designed for sort of general education, Matt, I think. But we adapted it specifically for the esports context to actually look at these, signals and identifiers of what level of inclusion is your esports program operating at. And there's, every program works differently. There's going to be different things, and nothing's wrong, but we thought it was going to be a really helpful way to teachers to actually to, assess their program. And that helps with communication with leadership too. We can say, well, we don't have a separate program for our students with disability. They're actually, participating in the same program as everyone else. And we've got, adaptive hardware options and communication devices just integrated in the whole program. So it doesn't matter how you play, you still have that same equal opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, similar to the first book with the 39 things to look for in cooperative games, the inclusive framework from Be to Belong, to me was, I thought, the greatest addition to the esports space in a long time, because you gave coaches and educators a lens to evaluate their own program, right? And that's something that in the space of esports, we don't have enough of, right? Because it's so new. The first team was probably in 2018 when you're looking at the middle school and high school space, at least in the United States. And, even I would argue in 2018, it was still kind of taboo to research it and take it seriously in games in the classroom. And so for a long time, not folks totally aren't sure. And when folks come to us, a Gameplan, for example, a lot of them are coming with what you said, Jess, is how can we leverage this to get kids to be excited about school? How can we get them to show up? How can we tie grades, behavior, and attendance to participation? And, because you can't teach a kid if they're not in the building. You can't keep them, you can't keep them up on their grades and stuff like that if they're not in the building. So, if esports, again, is going to be that tool, that vehicle that gets kids excited to show up, or, esports electives are getting popular, or like I said, as an English teacher, integrating esports and gaming into my classroom, that was just kind of the vehicle to get them excited. So the inclusive framework I thought was fantastic. And so around the framework, Matt, can you go a little bit deeper into perhaps in the framework as an evaluation tool, right? I know you said it was adopted from Sweden, which I'm sure will make the rest of the Gameplan team happy. They're based in Sweden. Yeah. But what was it about the framework that they had that inspired you to adopt it for Be to Belong?
Yeah, so what I really liked was it was really accessible, the framework. And they were looking at inclusive education from the sense of disability inclusion in a classroom, but they provided 6 keys, and things like accessibility, things like belonging, and so these 6 keys were really very much so focused on how our young people can not just participate but be active members of their community within the classroom. And we thought this has translated so well to esports, these 6 keys. So the framework also had 4 different levels of inclusion. And not saying that the entry level participation is bad. It's just saying, okay, where participation, as Jess was saying, being in the space, in the room, allowed to join the esports program is fantastic. But we can go beyond that, right, and we can move towards community. And so as an evaluation tool, or a tool for reflexive practice, is what we really want for a teacher.
Right.
We say, if we're trying to build up these school communities where students have their agency and voice, not just having the teacher use this tool, but getting everyone in the esports program to look at the framework and say, where are we now and where do we want to go? What are the next steps? and giving the students some ownership there and saying, okay, so as a community, how can we increase formal and informal belonging within our esports program and move towards what we call level 4, the community level, where we have full ownership over our program. And it sounds like, Chris, what you were saying before about, students running the day before and some of these things that can happen. And we talked about, how as a teacher, how off camera, we talked about how stressful that can be.
Right.
But it is moving towards that space where our young people who are going to be our future leaders, and think about stepping back. What is the value of what we're doing here? Is by giving them agency and voice, putting them in positions of power, teaching them that social responsibility to their fellow citizen, and saying, okay, as a community, how can we make sure we're opening the door for everyone? And I think that's really, really important when we think about why esports and why we do esports and what's the value, is we're inviting people into the conversation in a space that's traditionally, as you're saying, pushed out of schools or discouraged from schools. It allows people to show what they can do. And that's the real value of this framework, I think, is that we're really helping students to get these life skills to create a more inclusive world, which I think is big picture, but that's really what we want to do is hopefully change society. Right.
And I couldn't agree more, especially as you talk about changing society, right, is, gaming and reaching kids in this space is important, right? When I go to my town Facebook page, it's not the kids that are treating each other poorly, right? It's the adults. And, this is one of those spaces. I know I hear from a lot of educators that this space can be intimidating because it's one of those worlds where kids know more than the adults when it comes to games and gaming and stuff like that. But ultimately, to your point, is anything that we can do to get them to understand what an inclusive community looks like, and giving them the space, like, we said, we let kids run our events and, have them do things like, the amount of hoops I had to jump through to allow my kids to live stream to Twitch in the middle of the class. And a lot of it was from this place of fear. What if they do this? What if they do that? Or what if somebody in the chat says this? But that's also a learning experience, right? How can we prepare them to be leaders if we don't let them lead? How can we prepare them, to fix mistakes and recover if they never are allowed to make any mistakes? And so that's part of, too, is what I love is as you move across this framework into community, it, again, goes back to something we said at the top of the show. It just looks like good teaching, right? It's you eventually give up ownership and you let them take control. And I always said the best days I ever had teaching is where I just sat back and let the kids, do what they needed to do. And I think that is so well captured in Press B to Belong. And I like that you said that, that first level, it's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. The fact that you're even thinking about it is wonderful. But knowing that there's steps and there's stages, and just because you've created a space for people to walk in the room, right, doesn't mean that is inclusivity, that they're part of the community, that, they're valued and, contributing just like everybody else. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time since I read books that have fundamentally just like, yeah, that's it. Like that's it. So, I mean, if you have not gotten a chance, I highly encourage you, get yourself a copy of B to Belong, get yourself a copy of Collaboration for Students. I mean, you guys outdid yourselves. And I, again, can tell you what a fan I am. And so I'm hoping that as this reaches our Gameplan audience, which is a large group of educators and administrators who are willing to take that leap into esports, they're willing to use gaming as a vehicle for learning, understanding, right, that there's levels, there's a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of great ways that we can use this stuff. And a lot of it is around and captured in the work that you're doing and in the books that you've written. So again, from one educator to other educators, thank you. Because this is the stuff this is the stuff that makes our jobs easier. You know, it makes us be able to take this great stuff and bring it to our kids and our classes and our communities that we serve. But before I let you go, I know you guys are just starting your day in Australia. I got to go tuck my kids in a little bit. It's nighttime here. Where can folks keep up with you? Where, what projects do you have coming up that we can get excited about? Just give me what you guys got cooking.
You can find us on LinkedIn if you search our names. I'm the one with red hair in the picture. That is that. We're also on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just Jess Rowlings, X, I think as Elon calls it now. But yeah, I'm just Jess Rowlings, very creative. And Matt, your hat designs, H-A-T-T.
Hat designs.
Yeah.
Yes, HATT designs. Yes, at Hat designs.
We'll get all those links in the show notes so everyone can collect and connect directly with you guys. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say you can find our books. Just Emerald Publishing is Press B to Belong. And if you're looking for using video games to level up collaboration, you can look for that on Routledge is the publisher.
Wonderful. Yep, and we'll have links to those too as well. So definitely encouraging any educator, any administrator jumping in with games, game-based learning, and esports. Definitely, this is something that you guys want to pick up because it's just it's quality stuff. So.
Thanks.
You guys know I think you're wonderful. Keep up the great work. And thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.